Fair representation, the politics of election. This is a big deal. If we're going to have a representative government, if it's going to be a democracy in which we the people vote and decide who our representatives will be, it is a big deal that the process by which they are chosen ought to be fair. Ought to be fair to the candidates, and it ought to be fair to the people to make sure their vote counts. So there are a number of issues that come up with respect to fair politics. One is malapportionment. What malapportionment means is having election districts of greatly varying sizes. And when we say size here, we're not talking about the geographic size. We're talking about the population. So what malapportionment says is that one district ought to be about the same size as any other district. So in California, we have some 33 million people. We have 53 congressional election districts. Strike that. Yes, 53 congressional election districts for the House of Representatives. What that means is each one of those districts ought to have about, and we're talking within a handful of people, the same number of people in it as any other district in the state does. Now, obviously, from state to state, they're going to vary in size just because of the population. But that's what that means. That's what that means. They ought to be apportioned the same. There should be no malapportionment. Gerrymandering. So we can even have a appropriately apportioned district, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the election district would be fair. You could gerrymander an election district to make it easy to favor a particular political party or a particular political candidate. You could, knowing who lives in an area, demographically speaking, who they vote for. Are they more of a liberal district, more of a Democratic area, more of a conservative Republican area? And you could lump some of those together to make sure somebody gets elected. That is also illegal. That is known as gerrymandering. We'll come back to that in a second. Before we get there, we want to talk about reapportionment. So this idea of malapportionment, that you have election districts which are about the same size, every 10 years the Constitution requires that that a census be taken. The reason being, you recall, the House of Representatives was going to be based on population. So we needed to count the individuals who were in the country to determine how many members each state got in the House. This was known as apportionment. So the initial time it was apportionment. And then every 10 years there would be a reapportionment required by the Constitution based on changing population. That would determine how many members of the House a particular state got. And so what happened early on, the House of Representatives, since the founding, when the founding first apportioned it, there was about 70 members of the House of Representatives, maybe it was 80, and so then every 10 years they count it. And instead of saying, okay, Virginia, you lost, or New Jersey, you lost a member of the House of Representation House of Representatives because you just don't have as many people proportionally living in your state as do other states now. Instead of doing that and taking away representatives from a state, what Congress kept doing until 1911 was they just kept adding members to the House of Representatives until it got up to 435. And so finally, after the 1910 census, and there were now 435 members of the House of Representatives, Congress said, this is crazy, this is ridiculous, this is getting way too much, way too much. We got way too many people here in the House of Representatives. It's hard to get anything done. And so they said, okay, we're fixing the size of the House of Representatives at 435. And so from now on, so in the next reapportionment, which would have been in 1920, they said, some states, you may lose votes. You may lose votes relative to other states. So when I was a kid growing up, I remember in elementary school, so it would have been late 1960s, the state that had the most representatives in Congress was New York. and they told us I don't know why I remember this, but they told us, they said so many years from now, if population trends keep moving as they are, that New York won't have the most population in the United States. It will be California, and they'll therefore have more members of the House of Representatives than any other single state. And sure enough, today I believe New York has 32 members of the House of Representatives, whereas California has 53. So that reapportionment occurs every 10 years by the census, and then the House of Representatives divvies up the members of the House based on that. All right, moving on. So, when the Constitution was first established, each member of the House of Representatives represented about 30,000 people. 1910, after that census, it was up to 194,182. 1990, 570,466. 2000, 646,952. Not quite sure what it is today. You look at this and you think, wow, how can one member of the House of Representatives fairly represent these people? But you look at the technology we have today versus the technology they had back here. We've got computers, we've got cell phones, we've got more money now. That we've got these offices that you can contact. That wouldn't have been the case back here. So there's still plenty of representation, despite the fact that one member of Congress represents this many people. All right, so what we want to do for a second here is we want to talk about this idea of gerrymandering. So remember what goes on. So here we are again, the definition of gerrymandering. An election district is drawn in a bizarre or unusual shape to make it easier for a member of a political party to get elected, or a specific individual to get elected. So if you look at you look at all these different colors here, what you see is each one of these different colors is an election district within that state. Now in California, it doesn't look like we have that many relative to the 53 or so I just said. But if you were to look right in here, you would see there's a ton right here in the Bay Area. You'd also see that there's a ton right here in the Los Angeles area. So each one of these districts, these different shades, remember, it's not based on geographic size. It's based on population. So it takes, in this up here in the northern part of California, this geographic size has about the same number of people living in it. It just does a little district down here in the greater Los Angeles area or the San Francisco Bay Area. So remember, a bizarre or unusual shape. So let's take a look at District 42 of the congressional districts. If you look at this, here's Chino Hills. This would be Diamond Bar over here, and you get down into Orange County right here. So knowing anything about this, what can you presume about this? You can presume that this is a conservative area, and chances are somebody from the Republican Party is going to win this congressional district. So then the question becomes, why do they reach down in here and grab this? And why did they come over here and grab this? Why don't they make it just a little more straightforward? Well, remember, there's a couple things going on. You've got it, one election district has to be about the same population number as any other. So there's going to be some odd shapes. But then the question becomes, what is the motivation for that particular shape? So you see in this picture over here that what I was just talking about when I showed you this slide right here in the greater Los Angeles area. You see all these election districts right here in the greater Los Angeles area. So let's blow that up just a little bit here. So look at this election district right here, number 32. Why in the heck does it come down here and then this little line over here and grab these over here, and then the one right below it looks like 38? Why that kind of horseshoe thing right here, and 39 and coming up in there? Again, it's based on size, but it certainly seems that there's some gerrymandering going on. Now, unusual sizes, who's to say what an unusual size is? But you get the idea here. Like, take this election district right here, 45. Why come up here and grab this? What is going on there? So this idea that just because there's an unusual size doesn't necessarily mean that it's gerrymandered. It doesn't mean that it's not either. What is the motivation? So let's take this district right here. Here's Pomona. Here's La Puente. This little narrow neck of land connecting it here. It's pretty obvious, if you know anything about Pomona and La Puente, that this is going to be a liberal district. So why then do they skip Chino Hills and Diamond Bar? It's like they've carved out this to make sure a Democrat gets elected. They've lumped, as we saw earlier here with this district, they've lumped the Republicans into a given area. They said, okay, hey, we'll give you that. We're going to make sure we get more election districts for our liberal friends. So, which raises another question: who decides what the districts look like, or who makes the final determination? It is a state decision. Ultimately, it is the state legislature's decision. So the real question becomes: who is in power in the state? Is it Democrats or Republicans in power when the congressional redistricting takes place? So it only takes place every 10 years, and if the liberals, if the Democrats are in power, you're probably going to get more districts that favor Democrats than that favor Republicans. Let's take another, because that dynamic, the fact that the Democrats are in power. So look at this district right here. This one doesn't look too bad. It looks like it's kind of all right there in the same area. There's this little carved out point right here, but there again, you've got to have it roughly the same size. So how do you really know? It's tough to know, but the key there lies in the fact that which political party was in power when the decision was made. And so in the elections that fall on 2020, this election is a big deal because it's going to decide who's in power when the redistricting, when the census takes place and the redistricting take place. Now, also, with this, districts must be contiguous. That means they have to touch. So you can't have this little portion right here, nothing that connects it to this, then another lump over here. So the districts must be contiguous. They must be self-contained. They've got to touch. In addition to being contiguous, and we've already talked about this, they have to be as nearly as possible the same size. Now, the term gerrymander, where does that come from? It comes from the election of Elbridge Gerry. He was, I'm sorry, not Elbridge Gerry. So Elbridge Gerry, rather, was he was the governor of Massachusetts, and he wanted to make sure that one of his people got elected. So he had this election district drawn to make sure that would happen. So if you look at this election district, it's really kind of bizarre and unusual, this narrow neck of land. And so this guy by the name of Elkanah Tinsdale, he decided he'd make a political cartoon out of this and show the people how unfair this was. And so obviously he added the eyes and the fangs, and he dubbed this the gerrymander after Elbridge Gerry, trying to make sure that this guy got elected. And that's where the term gerrymander comes from, was from this election. Now, and we will. Okay, so evidence of gerrymandering. If you look at this chart right here, what you see is from 1968 to 1994, the percentage of the popular vote for Republican candidates versus what they actually received in the House of Representatives. And you can see all along here, they actually got more votes, a greater percentage of votes than they did seats. Look at 1978, that's particularly egregious. This seems to be evidence of gerrymandering. It wasn't until 1994 they actually won more seats in Congress than they actually received in votes. And so this idea of gerrymandering, it's real. It seems to be out there, and that's what it is. We'll pick up there with the next slide, or with the next video.